Welcome to the Columbus KTC Meditation Marathon, night 3. I hope everybody is getting a chance each day to get a little bit in and to help us get across the finish line towards the rebuilding of the center. It's pretty interesting to see. Luckily, I can walk down there anytime. Like I'm basically every other day or even every day, I get a little peek at what's been happening. And so, um, you know, it's the first time I've ever watched a building come from nothing, so there's like all these little steps and things and tools and molds for the parts of the walls look like bricks, but they're not. So there's these like giant flat molds that have like a brick imprint that they pour the concrete into and stuff. So I'm seeing all these things I never saw before. The most recent thing I saw is there are now pipes coming up out of the ground. So I'm assuming that's the plumbing. But it's still just an outside. There's no floors or rooms or anything yet, but the walls are there and the elevator shaft. So it's pretty exciting. So this program, we're going to do, I'll give a little brief instruction for shamatha meditation. And then we'll do a little practice, and then we'll talk a little more. We'll do a little bit more practice, and then I'm going to talk briefly about tonight's topic, which is courage. And then we'll do some questions, and we'll sit some more. So I think we can. There's not too many of us here, and I think we can keep this kind of loose. So like, if anyone has any questions along the way, just let me know. And so again, thanks for being here for this, and thanks for taking part. I think most of us have had some experience with meditation, but I'm going to take the time to give a brief instruction anyway, because you never know when the way someone says something can click for you. So sometimes hearing things a new way is important, and I think it's also good to be aware, because it's something I struggle with all the time, that hearing repetition of this stuff, it's still the same important stuff every time. And I know sometimes I have to bring my attention back to the listening if I think I've heard something before, but it's good to do. So we'll start with this meditation is shamatha, which is commonly known as mindfulness meditation or calm abiding, tranquility meditation. And it basically involves placing the attention. So that's the technique that we're going to apply is placing the attention. And there's lots of things you can place the attention on. We generally start with the breath. So that's what we'll use. The physical posture, there's 7 points that I still can't remember off the top of my head. But once you get used to it, you kind of, everything falls into place. And the broad point is balance, really. But balance between not keeping things too tight, and not being too relaxed and slouchy. So it's the same thing with the mental technique too, to be honest. But so the physical posture, those 7 points, which I have written down, are a grounded seat, which is, and that can be with your legs crossed, however is comfortable for you. The best way is in lotus posture or vajra posture, depending on your whether you've had yoga or Buddhist teachings. Or also an easier way that I didn't learn till very late was this bodhisattva posture, which is or sattva posture, which is your one leg in front of the other. And initially I was doing the, I think we call it crisscross applesauce now, like we used to do in preschool. And so initially I did that, but I came to realize when I tried the sattva posture that one's much more stable, and that's much more, you're evenly distributed throughout the lower part of your body. So if it's not something you've tried before, I would recommend to give it a shot next time you're sitting, because it gave me a lot more sense of stability and groundedness, which is the idea. And the second point is drawing up. And we have a meditation teacher here who says, I don't know if he coined the phrase, but he says, stick out your butt and stick out your gut. And I've always found that really helpful. So you kind of scoot side to side, stick your butt out, stick out your gut. And that will kind of continue this upward motion of making things solid. You know, we're kind of setting this base. And then, so your seat, we draw up. The hands, generally, I've always was taught to do your thumb behind your ring finger and then close. And this kind of sucks, but somebody just told me the other day, they sent me this unrelated to meditation, that this is actually the symbol you're also supposed to use if you're in danger on a video call. So I'm fine, but just so you know that this is supposed to be the universal symbol for that. So maybe that'll be helpful, hopefully not. But so that this, or you can also just place your hands palm down on your knees. And that also helps with the stability, because if you straighten your arms, they don't have to be tight straightened, but if you straighten them, that helps sort of lift your shoulders up and again build the stability. And we keep the back straight. That doesn't mean like your lower back will still have this natural curve, but keep your your upper back straightens up a little bit. And the chin comes just a little bit in. The tongue can rest on the roof of your mouth behind your front teeth, your top teeth. And then the gaze will be down the nose. Or another way to say it is if your hand, hold your hand out in front of you, it's kind of where your fingertips are. So another way, like something that comes from Qigong, like something that kind of helps if you want a short way to try to get that rounded sort of posture, is you can imagine there's a string on the top of your head that's attached, like not in the middle of the top of your head, but towards the back, kind of where your cowlick would be. And then if you pull that string, that sort of lifts everything up. It brings your chin in a little bit. So it's a nice, quick, easy way to find a good, solid posture. So that's the physical posture. And then the mental technique is, like I said, placing the attention on the breath. And we'll start that with an intention to be a benefit to ourselves and to all sentient beings equally, impartially. So we make that intention in the beginning, and then we begin the technique with one big cleansing breath, a breath in and a breath out. And that's a way to sort of get yourself in the moment. And that is not, that one big breath in and out is just the first time. And then after that, you won't manipulate the breath anymore. So after that, we're just leaving the attention on the breath, the sensation of the breath coming in and out. There's lots of ways that you can, there's sort of stages of that. Generally in the beginning, you want to count the out breath. So each out breath is 1, and you breathe in, 2. That's a good technique because number one, it'll help you tell when you get distracted, because if you lose your count, clearly something's happened. So it's also, for me in the beginning, it was a way to kind of challenge myself in a healthy way, like how how far can I go, like, so 21 is where we try to go, and then we start again. But that's a good way to gauge your progress a little bit, and also a way to make sure that you're connected with your breathing and placing the attention where you want it to be. So let's have a short sit. We'll go about 4 minutes or so. And again, so body balanced, upright. And then, and like I said, the balance aspect for our mental technique is, placing the attention on the breath, but you don't have to concentrate on the, you don't have to this shouldn't be too much effort. This is the middle way. This is what the Buddha taught. So this is finding that balance between letting your mind wander off and being too fixated on what you're trying to do. So we're kind of just going to be in the middle. And so let's begin. We'll do about 4 minutes, like I said. Elder, hello. You just appeared. So welcome everyone who's here now, and thank you for that little session. It always feels good. I purposely took a minute, and you probably noticed that after ringing the gong, because it's important to take a little bit of what we do during our session off the cushion with us. So it's always advisable not to just hop off your cushion and into your daily stuff. So it's good to kind of take a minute, breathe, um, make the aspiration that your practice benefits yourself and others, and then proceed with your day, trying to take a little bit of that mindfulness with you. And in the broad sense, like we talked about a few weeks ago in the mindfulness weekend, mindfulness can be defined as remembering what to adopt and remembering what to reject. And that's a great way to look at it, throughout the course of your daily life. When we do shamatha practice, it's a lot less about what to reject. The focus is much more on remembering what to adopt, or in particular, remembering to apply the technique. And that technique, we're placing the attention on the breath, but how do we do that? The way we do it is, first of all, by kind of accepting the fact that our attention isn't gonna just stay there. Like that's, if it did, we would have this done. It wouldn't be practice anymore. We would just have it. So there's an important acceptance that comes with knowing that your attention will wander, and then when it does, if you're accepting of it, it's going to happen. It's not a big deal. You just notice your thinking. You can label it as thinking if you want, and then you just come back. You just come back to the breath gently. That's what my first meditation teacher, he used that phrase a lot, and I love it. Just come back. It's just such a soothing sentence. Just come back. And so you have these two periods. You have this alternation. It's kind of a cycle. You've got your attention's in one place, and then your attention wanders off, and you notice it. You don't get involved with what you were thinking about. You don't have to judge it. It's not important in the context of this practice. This practice is a non-conceptual practice. So you just notice it's a thought, bring your attention back to the breath. And that's what happens in a session of meditation. So that's why we say that any meditation you do is a good meditation, because there's days where things seem to just be really great in our meditation. And meditation can seem incredibly soothing and a great experience in our day, but there's lots of times where our mind is moving faster than we'd like, or we're sleepy or uncomfortable, and but it's equally as important to apply the technique. I mean, what we're practicing here, in applying that technique, and in this alternation, noticing the distraction and coming back to the breath, is two different faculties. The mindfulness faculty is remembering again what the technique is, but there's alertness that we're also cultivating, which is kind of like vigilance is another word for it. And that's what notices the distraction. Because before we start meditating, the vast majority of the time we're distracted throughout our daily lives, and we don't even notice a lot of the thoughts and the narratives that we're spinning in our head. And so that's kind of why when we start doing this type of thing, it can be a little overwhelming, because we start to notice all this stuff happening that we didn't know was even there. So this alertness that we're cultivating is that's what reminds us, or that's what notices that we're distracted. And I think it's important to know that those two things are what we're working on, because in a way, if we didn't have distraction, we wouldn't be able to work on that alertness. So the alertness is helping us to apply the mindfulness. And when you think about that in a broader sense too, like anytime that we lose our mindfulness in the course of our daily lives. If it's in, like all of us, I think here have an aspiration to be kind and helpful people to others. But all of us here at some point have lost our temper or been short with somebody. And, those things happen. And then hopefully we notice it. We notice that we've kind of lost our mindfulness about being kind to others, and we can try to rectify that. So that's not to say it's okay to not be nice to people, but it is to say that we will lose our mindfulness sometimes on this path. And so remembering that those noticing those moments is really important, and so we're cultivating that in meditation too. So let's do another short sit for another 5 minutes or so, and then we'll talk about some courage. Does anyone have any questions before we move on? Okay, let's have another sit. Thank you, everybody. So we talked a little bit about this alternating between these periods of attention on the breath and these periods of when we find ourselves distracted, periods of mental wandering. And we talked about when we notice that our attention has left the breath, um, been carried away or floated away on a thought, whatever that was, that all we need to do is just come back to the breath. And when we do, that's applying, then we apply the mindfulness, which is remembering to apply the technique. So Mama Kathy talked about how yesterday she talked a little bit about how sometimes we can feel like we're so confined or even kind of oppressed by our thoughts and our habits that we feel locked into who we think we are. And like I said earlier, before we started engaging in meditation, we were largely unaware of what was going on in our minds. You know, we were not paying attention. We didn't really notice. Like if you think back, I mean, we still do it now, all of us, I'm sure too. But if you think about the times where you start to tell yourself a story about yourself or someone else or something, and you know, you can spin these stories for, you know, a surprisingly long amount of time, and kind of, you know, you may not be aware you're doing it, but and that's one of the ways that people suffer in this world, you know. But it may not be voluntary. You may not be aware it's happening, but you know, you're in a way creating your own suffering in those situations. So being able to cultivate what we cultivate in shamatha is important. You know, it's training, um, and like a lot of training, it doesn't necessarily look exactly like what we're training for. You know, like the time we spend on the cushion is kind of a unique time, you know, in our day. There's not a lot of other times where we do what we're doing in meditation, but it's working on, it's strengthening the faculties we need for our time off the cushion. So it's important to remember that, because it's not like a special thing we're doing on the cushion that doesn't apply anywhere else. And 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 even though in the beginning and even maybe afterwards it can feel somewhat contrived or stilted, um, we're gaining familiarity with how our mind works, and it's that mind that experiences everything. So in gaining this familiarity with ourselves, you know, like with what, you know, what's there, with how our thoughts arise, how they dissipate, how we have a tendency to either get carried away by them or to maybe cling to them because we feel like we want to, or we sense that it's somehow important to. These are all really important things. We're getting familiar with our minds, and in fact, that's the Tibetan word for meditation. That's what that means. It's gong, and it means to familiarize. So that's what we're doing, you know, and we're becoming familiar with our own minds. So in the beginning, again, it may feel unnatural, but and it may be difficult. You know, like I said, like not every session is may not feel therapeutic, you know, or serene, but we're becoming familiar, and it's important to do that. Lama Kathy uses the term fresh start a lot when she talks about, you know, when we notice we're distracted, we come back for a fresh start. And I think that's important because today's topic is courage. And I did the tired old trope of looking up the word in the dictionary. And I think there's tropes for a reason. So I'm not too ashamed of it, but I'll give it to you. So the courage definition I found is the ability to do something that frightens one, or strength in the face of pain and grief. And part of the reason why I volunteered to do this talk was because I thought, like, what is, I never really thought about courage before at all. Like, what is this, you know? So And so the first thing I thought is, okay, well, do I know what it feels like? Do I know what courage feels like? And that's kind of a, I mean, think about that for yourself for a second. Do you feel like you know a time in your life when you were courageous? I think it's probably more likely that we know the times when we weren't, and we may be more familiar, a lot more familiar with what it feels like when we sense a lack of courage. Like that, I think we all know very well. So that said, I think we're all more courageous than we think. I think there's probably a lot more courage present in any given month or week or day even than we realize, and we have the capacity to become infinitely more courageous. And courage, I think, starts with and is present in each of those fresh starts that we take in a session of shamatha. Um, every time we make a choice where our attention is going to go, what technique we're going to apply, that's courageous. When we make an intentional and beneficial choice for ourselves, um, and for others, because frankly, it benefits others too. So we make this choice not to be carried away from whatever it is we're choosing to place our attention on. And what we're doing is bringing out the best in us. When we practice shamatha, we're cultivating something that's important. Like I said, it's intentional and it's beneficial. It's a strength that you're building, and an awareness and a familiarity that you're building with yourself. And it's a choice to do that. And that second, it's a choice. First of all, it's a choice to sit down and do your meditation. But each of those times when you realize you're distracted and you bring your mind back, it's a choice that you maybe never even realized you had in life. Like until you're exposed to shamatha, like you maybe never realized that you aren't tied to every thought that passes through your head, and you aren't defined by all this chatter that we sit through every day, and that is maybe present. Then when we become aware of it, we're able to make a choice that, first of all, we're aware of something we maybe weren't aware of before, and we also can make a choice now that we know the beneficial way to go. We know the beneficial thing is to bring our attention back to the breath. And so in one sense, it may seem like we're working with, I'm sorry, in one sense, it seems nothing like working with the big stuff, fear. Like this definition was the ability to do things that frighten us, and strength in the face of pain and grief. So fear, pain, grief, like these are the extreme examples. But through this process of noticing our distractions and bringing our attention back to the breath, we train in the foundation of what brings about courage. Because fear and pain and grief, those are all forms of dissatisfaction, and the Buddha said that dissatisfaction is a part of our experience, in samsara, in this, our experience. So, we're working with the small version of this. Like when you train in anything, you don't, if you're going to run a marathon, you don't just go out and run 26 miles. You start somewhere, right? And it's probably with stretching. It's not even with running, So like that doesn't even look like running, right? So that's kind of part of what we're doing in shamatha. So this made me think of going into retreat. Part of what we do is chant in Tibetan, and so everybody knows they have to learn to read Tibetan. And thank you, Lamo, for helping me with that. But most people don't realize when they come in that that there's an aspect of chanting that is music, and that's my degree. Like that's my background is music. So, but that's not the background of most Tibetan Buddhists, And so nobody was taught anything about chanting with a group, So there's this idea of like being able to keep going as you chant. Like you can't stop. Like if you think about chanting, it has to be a steady pace. And if you're practicing at home and you're starting and stopping, that's not going to fly when you get with a bunch of people. So, for instance, like one might not think that getting a metronome out, something that clicks a steady pace, is necessary to learn to chant. But when you take it into the big group, it's absolutely necessary to have that ability to keep going. So there are things that there are things, maybe mechanisms that are at play that we don't always recognize, right? And so this alternation of attention on what we want to place the attention on, remembering what to adopt, and these periods of distraction, I think that's kind of the mechanism that drives our whole experience. So if that makes sense, like what I'm trying to say is that this idea of working with shamatha is courageous, and it breeds courage. It happens whenever we think things like, I could be meditating right now, and you go and you do it. That's courageous. Because there's always something else you could do. Like there's always like you could always watch Netflix. There's 100 other things that you could easily be carried away on. And we all know that. It takes no practice to watch Netflix. It takes no practice to take an extra nap during the day or any of these things. It takes a little effort to meditate. And similarly, it doesn't take any practice to not think about what that person said to you the other day that ticked you off. Like we'll go right into that and hang on to it for a long time. But it takes a little effort to bring the attention back to the breath, and do that instead. So this is the small version of these big things, these big things like fear and pain and grief. And so I want to make the point about sitting and like when you practice that, like it is courageous just to sit down. There's layers of this courageousness happening, right? Like one of them is just in the practice itself. Another one is actually sitting down and doing it, and I want to make the point that I can't speak for all of you, but I'll tell you my own experience. I have a hunch this is true for all of you, that for me, I've never said, wow, I regret meditating this morning. Whew, glad I didn't do that meditation today. I've never said that. So when we come to these situations where we think, maybe I could sit, I promise you it's probably a good idea, So think about that sometimes, and similarly, I never have said like, glad I got that extra 3 episodes of The Office in today, because it doesn't work that way. So we know the things that help us, but they take a little effort, takes a little courage, So by making the decision to meditate and doing it, it's an act of courage in itself. There's always other things we might prefer to do. And those things would probably give us more temporary pleasure. But we know the best thing to do would be to sit and meditate. And we know we can make the choice to do it. So when we do, we're practicing courage. We're developing our courage. I think it's also important to realize that is courage something that when we need it, we can turn it on? Like when we find ourselves in a situation where we need courage, can we just say, now I will be courageous? And then we flip a switch and our courage arises. That's not really how it works. And meditation's kind of the same way. Like if we want to be courageous, we have to build the foundation of that. We have to train for it. A great teacher once said, when you need to use the bathroom, and there was a more colorful word than that, when you need to use the bathroom, it's too late to build the outhouse. So, of course, when we sit, sometimes it's nice, sometimes it's soothing. It's not always. But what I'm trying to say is that if you want to be ready to be courageous, if you want to build this courage, that starts first by getting on the cushion and then by applying the technique. Like that will build that courage for you. So it's there when you need it. You know, it's not something, it would be great if we could reach in a bag and get it when we need it, but we have to put in the work, you know, and that's something the Buddha said, you know, like we have to do the work ourselves. And that work is getting on the cushion. Um, so I also want to say on a personal note that my I know that my practice has gone awry when I start to feel overwhelmed by things. Things start to feel overwhelming. I start to feel weak, like there's too much. Um, Things lose their sense of workability. You know, things that just like they start to seem like, how is this going to even work? You know, and when I have that feeling, um, it has always been when my practice is off. Always. Like when my practice is steady and where it needs to be, like I'm doing as much as I need to do, um, then I don't have that feeling. It doesn't mean everything outside goes great. It doesn't mean everything in the external world is perfect, but everything seems a little more workable. And it's kind of like uh, that sense of things being workable is sort of like courage, you know, like if you can if you can move forward when things are painful or when you're experiencing grief, you can go ahead and do things that frighten you. And frighten again is the extreme word. Like we might just say stuff that you don't really want to do. You know, if you can find the ability to do that, that's courageous. You know, and that stems from getting on the cushion and applying the technique. So, does anyone have any questions about that, or any comments they want to make of their own about courage or anything? If not, of course we can sit because that's what we're here to do. All right. Let's do that. Let's take the remainder of our time and sit together. It is nice to be sitting with you guys. Thank you, everybody. So just a quick sum up, like I would just hope that we all make an effort not to underestimate, the value of these choices that we take when we decide to sit down. You know, um, like we said today, like we're going against where we would normally float to. Where we would normally just kind of mindlessly go when we make a decision to sit down. So it's courageous, and it's the building blocks of it, and it's what will bring that about later. So it's important to feel good about that, and realize that you've done something courageous when you sit down to meditate, something that will help you have the ability to do things that frighten you and help you, to have strength in the face of pain and suffering. So, any questions before we wrap up?
Yes, thank you, Lama. Um, this is Tom. Hey.
Hey, Tom,
Uh,
thank you.
so, hey. So I guess what I'm trying to formulate in my mind is probably 85.5% of the times of courage are off the cushion time. So it's addressing stress, addressing daily life, grievance. I mean, you listed off a bunch of those aspects where I say a lot of that comes off the cushion time. How does meditation prepare you for that? Um, the only thing that I can say, maybe to lead in, is I remember maybe even Lama Tom or Lama Kathy, with a statement of, well, you know, look at that thought. Who is the mind thinking that thought? I mean, this may be getting advanced techniques, but part of me isn't like there yet, right? It's like, well, I'm thinking it and I am mad, or whatever.
Yeah.
But anyway, so that's, I hope there's a question there that I was trying to formulate, and just how is it connected between meditation and off the cushion time to be courageous and face grieving or face anger or
Yeah.
anxiety?
Well, I'll try to answer, and if there's more, or if you want to redirect me, let me know. But I would say that I would tie it back to the Four Noble Truths. The Buddha said that suffering is a part of life, that suffering has a cause, and that cause is fixation or clinging. That when we remove the cause, we can experience the cessation of suffering, and that there's a path to achieve that. If you look at fixation, it's what we're talking about here is self-fixation, and frequently the easiest way to understand it is self-cherishing. Like doing the things, like thinking about our own comfort, like always. So I think hopefully this gets to maybe what you're asking, like how does it connect to meditation? Meditation isn't necessarily doing that isn't our natural inclination. Like if we're lucky enough to feel like I'm gonna go sit, this is the best part of my day. Like we probably all feel like that sometimes, but most of us, we got to make a little effort to go sit down. And what's making us not want to sit down is that self-cherishing. That's the self-clinging. Like, and that is what the Buddha said is the cause of suffering. you know so similarly, when we're sitting down and we're doing our practice and we're on the cushion and we think of something really important that we just think in that moment is super important, you know um, we can follow that thought, or we can move our attention back to the breath. And following the thought would be self-cherishing in a way. You know what I mean? It would be like, I think this is important, I'm going to cling to this thing is maybe it like leans towards this thing is me, this defines me. Like anger can be like that. Like uh, maybe this is getting a little off track, but like whenever I find myself saying, but I'm a person who, that's a tip off for me that maybe there's some self clinging going on, because we think we have to do whatever we thought, you know. So in meditation, it's like I said, it's a small version of these bigger things. So it doesn't, it may not look on its face to be the big version of courage, but the big version of courage couldn't be there without those little small versions that we work on in getting on the cushion, the challenge of that, which is sort of taking the momentum away from maybe laziness or distractedness. And then when we're on the cushion, placing the attention on the breath and trying to remember to apply that technique, and not elect to get carried away by our thoughts. Does that help, Tom? Good. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Anybody else? If not, let's just take a moment to silently dedicate the merit of our time here tonight, making the aspiration that ourselves and all beings can be free of suffering, and we can find the ways to cultivate our own courage so that we can help others to do the same. Okay, thank you, everyone. I think tomorrow night is Lama Tom, right? Yeah. Cool. Resilience?
Yep.
All right. Tomorrow night will be resilience, Lama Tom. And thank you all for being here. It's great to see you. Best of luck. Take care.